Welcome to SHOWstudio. It's our very first couture panel of the season, but it's a really interesting one to be starting with because Schiaparelli kind of throws up a lot of discussions about the current state of couture and the current state of fashion. Things from like HR movements about designers kind of being on this revolving door policy in houses, going in, doing a couple of seasons, sort of moving on, because obviously at Schiaparelli we've just got a new creative director, but the previous creative director, Marco Zanini, was actually only there for 2 seasons. But it also throws up other topics like fashion's relationship with art, all the things we're going to dissect and discuss. I've got a fantastic set of panellists with me from all different aspects of the industry, which is always nice, to help me sort of unpick what's going on over in Paris. But before we kick off our discussions, I'll let you guys introduce yourselves, starting here.
Hi, I'm Rosie Wallin. I'm a lecturer and a researcher at Centre St Martin's.
I'm Belle Jacobs and I'm a writer and blogger.
I'm Caroline Charles and I'm a designer.
Hello, I'm Alex Fullerton and I'm the fashion director of Stylist magazine.
So I want to kick off by talking about the new creative director who we've got there, Bertrand Guillon. It's his first season, and I feel like there's a lot of warmth from the industry towards him because he's always been someone who's kind of worked in-house. So he worked for a long time at Givenchy, Christian Lacroix, and then before that Valentino, and the 2 Valentino designers are sort of at the show to support him. It's obviously always exciting when you have a new creative director at a house, but I think there is an apprehension always within fashion when we see designers come in and only do a very short amount of time and then move on, and that's exactly what just happened with Marco Zanini. How do we avoid this kind of constant movement in fashion when we work on such a frenetic pace? How do we stop it that people have kind of time to settle in? How do we stop that kind of awful movement? You were nodding there.
Well, I was just, for some reason, I was just thinking it's a bit like football managers, you know, unless you're there for a certain amount of time, it's quite difficult to really make a difference. And I think that Zanini had a really difficult job to start a new. I mean, it's almost like he called it a bit like being a startup, you know, because Schiaparelli obviously had been closed for such a long time, since the 50s. And I think it was evident in the collections that he did, you know, that he started out perhaps a little bit too conservative and then went a little bit too much into sort of perhaps surrealism and trying to kind of bring out all of the Elsa's traits. And probably his third might have been the one, as we saw with Raf Simons at Dior. I think the third one was the most him. And before that he was kind of feeling his way. So I think 2 seasons is difficult.
Yeah, I think it's really smart what you say also about the difficulty of the brief there, because being somewhere where you're kind of reviving a house, but also kind of not really, because everyone seemed... We see so many heritage revivals now that it almost kind of means nothing. It almost is a blank slate. You know, some houses that are revived, people aren't remotely sort of respectful to the archive. They just almost use the name and start afresh. So it's kind of, there's so many different politics and pathways to take there. It's very difficult. What did we all think of what Marco Zanini was doing there? Were we fans? What did you think, Belle?
There were certain outfits that I really, really liked. I thought it was all very disparate. That was the thing I thought about the collections. They were incredibly eclectic. I felt that he suffered maybe from bad direction, and so the last collection that he did for the house was really quite dishevelled and almost unattractive. And I think I would have hated to have been him, actually. It must have been a really, really difficult position. But I do agree with what you said. I think they should have sort of committed him and gone, right, let's sit down, talk about this, work this through, get that third collection out and see what you can do. Because he's proved himself on so many other sort of arenas. You know, he's a very, very talented, very versatile designer, but they decided not to go with it. So I imagine, you know, the mood at the house must have been pretty awful before he left.
I think you're only as good as whoever is managing you, in every walk of life. You know, if you've got good management that can support you and talk it through, or if you've got a boss who's going to be knee-jerk and be like, no, what is this collection? No, I want this. And then you're kind of like, oh, and then you just get into a spiral of, I don't know what to do. Should I make it more? You know, a tribute to Elsa, or should I make it less? And there are so many paths to go. I would hate to be a designer coming into a house with a legacy like this. I'd be terrified.
It's
such
an
a good point.
independent company, this.
It's owned by, I'm going to get his name wrong now. It's
Diego Della Valle.
Thank you very much. Who owns Todd's?
That's right.
So it's not kind of a huge group.
No, but he might like to build it as his star. But then
it's interesting, isn't it? I think it's so smart what you just said about you're only sort of as good as the person who's kind of briefing you, because with a lot of these houses, and I think particularly with these kind of revived ones, you just step back and you almost want to say what are you hoping to achieve here?
Yeah.
And
Exactly. I think that's an interesting question.
Yeah, and you think it with this house in particular because they haven't revived the perfume yet. They don't seem to be doing the natural sort of commercial steps that you'd presume. So I feel like with Marco Zanini, you do just look at him and you think, did he even know what he was trying to do?
Maybe it was a mission impossible.
Exactly, So is he trying to get new couture clients? Is he just trying to drum up press? Is he trying to create enough of a fuss to start a ready-to-wear line? I don't know what he was tasked to do.
And maybe what he did in those collections was answer the brief he was given. You know?
Yeah, they probably changed it every time.
Except we don't know what the brief is.
We don't know what the brief is.
I wonder if they know what the brief is as well. Sometimes you get a bit of that impression.
I mean, I just think of driving shoes, Todd's driving shoes.
Yes.
And then I look at this and think, who is this for? Because the garment on the left we just looked at.
Because looking at it again, you just
lovely, perfect.
Yes.
You want a better garment, marvellous. And then on the right, it's very, very nostalgic. You know, you could be in the war. Very nice.
And also the thing that I was thinking that's interesting about Schiaparelli is that the reason that Schiaparelli closed was because that became irrelevant with Dior's new look, you know, after the war when she came back from America. And so it was very much of its time. Yeah. You know, it was very much situated between the wars. That was the whole kind of era, wasn't it? That it was reflecting and the surrealism of the time. And so it kind of doesn't make sense to try and recreate that time because that time doesn't exist now.
It's interesting also to talk about new couture because I think that's kind of what some of the releases around Schiaparelli when it kind of was revived and the couture started, they talked about offering something different to all the kind of, you know, the beautiful princess dresses. But I feel like you already actually have that. You have that on a technical side from people like Iris van Herpen doing something very modern.
Exactly.
But you also have it on a sort of more minimal sort of a more modern wardrobe side from someone like Boucher Jara who's doing like beautiful, very sort of relevant silhouettes. So again, you kind of look at this and you think, but what new couture are you offering? It still feels as
it's not
dated
new, really.
in a sense. Yeah.
It's about collaborations. She was about collaborations, which has now come around again to be an issue. And so Dali and the like worked with her on, you know, shoes on the head and fish on the jacket, etc. All of which was very amusing, and there was obviously a time for it.
Yeah.
And this brand would actually collaborate very well with the high street, wouldn't they? If they could just pick out their gorgeous leather jacket. But it is not speaking to a customer.
No, they're not sure what they're trying to do.
Very nice for people like us to have a look at.
But then it's such a fashion name. I don't know how many people would even remember it. It's like, you know, those great forgotten designers. That's
Shocking Pink.
Yeah.
My generation remembers Shocking Pink forever. And probably the smell was delicious. I never smelt it, did you?
No. I've got old bottles of it. My grandmother used to wear it, and I've got all her old perfume bottles. That was the thing that I was.
Does it? Can you still smell it?
You can smell. It's a really kind of like powdery, musky, very.
Yeah, that could be age, but I think it was. Because it was all to do with dressing tables, wasn't it?
Yeah, the bottles are amazing.
Yeah, I do feel that Schiaparelli was almost rediscovered about 5-8 years ago, wasn't it? And started to come back into public consciousness. And I remember going around the V&A textile archives with you, and they pulled out a drawer and it was a Schiaparelli, and you just went,
That's just me though, constantly excited. But I do think it's interesting to think about a kind of a fashion-informed woman today, whether it would be at the forefront of her mind, whether she would associate it with luxury. I think there's so many.
I think the women in the art business love this.
That's really right.
Yes. They absolutely want to dress like this. They stand out, and it really suits them. So if I was Mr. Guillaume, I'd just get on with that, because there's a lot of them.
But it's so interesting to say get on with that, because that's why I put as one of the topics, you know, art, fashion, collaborations, because when you say sort of get on with it, I look at it and I feel frustrated on their behalf, because I feel like there's so many things they could be doing that would make so much sense. Like fashion is so in love with the art world at the moment, and for once the art world seems to also be in love with fashion. You think, why aren't they doing these amazing collaborations? Why aren't they doing?
Because they don't know which direction they're going. And I think when they first sort of came out with the Le Croix collection, it was much, this is what we're going to be doing in the future.
Yeah, they said all these kind of pop-up collaborations.
But the art business is about dealers. It's not about H&M and great, wonderful high street.
But they could walk the line, I think, really well. They could do the two. They could do a big high street kind of collab based on all those icons, you know, the lobsters, the shoes, the zips, whatever the Shocking Pink, whatever you want to do. But then they could also do these more kind of interesting sort of, you know, the amazing things that people like Prada are doing, these kind of incredible sort of patronage of the arts type things.
I mean, I think that what I found really interesting when I was thinking about this is the big, at the time that she was very, very famous in the kind of, I suppose it was the 30s really, wasn't it?
Yeah.
She was rivals with Chanel. They were the big rivals. And when you think about where they came from, that's really interesting. You know, because Chanel was obviously a seamstress. She grew up with the sort of the craft of pattern cutting and garment construction, whereas Schiaparelli was an aristocrat. You know, and she was interested in, well, her father was a scholar, so she was interested in more the kind of thinking and the ideas rather than the craft of fashion. Yeah. And so I think, for me, one of the most obvious things to do would be to sort of honour that nowadays and to be really thinking about art and fashion much more so than has happened so far, rather than, you know,
but it's hard. I mean, Andy Warhol is maybe as far as people know. Yeah. You know, and this is, you'd have to tell the stories here a lot.
I mean, it would be kind of more really like working with Tracy Emin now, or you know what I mean, like working with a
but I do think it's an interesting point that you make, is if we're all saying it's such an insider's brand, actually, to do all those kind of like creative arty collaborations, it would be speaking to the same audience. You know, because a lot of those things, they're fantastic when you see high fashion houses doing amazing things with artists, but it is still that kind of very insider communication. It's not something that's going to break that out to the general
public. But that's why we have diffusion lines. And you know what I mean? That's why, as you said, they could be doing high street collaborations with the kind of more, you know.
I mean, I think that's partly the cause of your frustration, is that there are so many avenues that they could go down. It doesn't necessarily need to be an enclosed space. They can use other ways of reaching out, like, I mean, so many, really, like diffusions or a museum or patronage of the arts or a high street collaboration, whatever. There are so many ways now available to people to spread this out.
Who's getting art fashion collaborations right? Who's doing really exciting things? Prada.
They're way ahead.
Yeah.
And they're pretty much on their own, as far as I'm aware.
Well, Vuitton, I think they've done some clever things, haven't they?
Oh, they've done a handbag covered with drawings.
Well, they had the men's, the Jake and Dinos, and and the new Series 3. That's cool. So I think they're spending a lot of time thinking about it. But it's looking at, just, I don't know, if you get to the archives of Schiaparelli and you look through it, you've got to look beyond that there was a big shoulder and there was a lobster on a dress and there were pink dresses, and think, okay, start afresh. But then instead of taking a shape or a silhouette or a colour as a code of the house, you want to take
the thinking,
the art thing.
The ethos.
It's more the process. And I was thinking about the difference between this and perhaps what Hussein has done with V&A, you know, where he hasn't tried to kind of recreate V&A dresses from, you know, back in the day. It's more the thinking process, and that seems to be a much more modern way to take it.
But that's interesting actually, because I had this conversation with Olivier Risting, who does Balmain, and he was like, I think what I'm doing is exactly what like Mr. Balmain would have been doing if he was alive now. And I thought that was a really clever way of thinking about it, because he wasn't trying to do any of these kind of aesthetic nods. It was more about, okay, so who are the new jet setters? Who are the new, like, what would, and you do, I imagine if they thought, what would she be doing now? And I doubt she'd be doing something nostalgic.
No, of
whereas
course not.
She'd be so modern.
It'd be so modern.
People would be like, oh my God, she's Vanguard, she's doing everything. But with Balmain, I always think of the Peter Sarsgaard song. You know, her clothes were all made by Balmain, and you know that girl now in 2015, she's got the same wardrobe. She's Instagramming it all at the same time, but her clothes are still all made by Balmain.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think that's the thing, is it's just like fashion has the sense of what's nodding to an ethos. It doesn't have to just mean that you're kind of always like, as you say, doing the pink and doing this and doing that. It's so interesting, from the conversations we've had, it feels like we're kind of all agreeing that she was kind of way too ahead of her time. Like things like, even one of the things I wanted to talk about was this kind of notion of awkward or ugly dressing, which again is so now, like people are so interested in that, and you see it really underpins kind of the most exciting designers around at the moment. People like Prada, people like JW Anderson, it's what they do, and that's something that she did. And I think that's perhaps something that was difficult with Marco Zanini's work there, because there was this idea that couture shouldn't be ugly, and
it was too tasteful to begin with.
That's interesting. But do we feel like there is more of a market for kind of ugly dressing, and who does it well, and why is that awkwardness so appealing?
I think it's harder to shock now. I suppose so. Yes.
He does ugly dressing, doesn't he, on purpose? Goth or whatever you call it. Ugly. I don't know who else.
But it was easy to shock people in those days because society was a lot more restrained. You know, even the new look was a shock. You know, so I think now it's much harder. We've seen a lot, haven't we?
Yeah, that's
when
true.
it comes to fashion.
When I thought about the sort of phrase "ugly chic" or "jolie laid," I couldn't even really. I mean, was it just? I mean, you can think of things like Rei Kawakubo's
lumps and bumps.
The lumps and bumps, and then I think someone talked about, you know, when Marc Jacobs' grunge collection came out, that was quite shocking and you know, not overtly pretty. It's kind of it's sort of everything that's not overtly pretty. So something that doesn't
flatter,
cinch the waist, something that doesn't make you look slimmer with longer legs, something that moves away from traditional ways of thinking. But that's incredibly valuable now. I think all the most interesting and pioneering collections have moved away from traditional ideas of feminine beauty. Is that what ugly chic is? Yeah, I think it is.
But that's what's interesting, is it is one of those ideas that when you talk about ugly chic, it sounds like you're being very kind of insider in fashion, but actually I think the effect that that kind of dressing has had is huge. You see it if you walk down the street, you know, women are wearing kind of like, even things like the rise of boyfriend pieces, like that was such a, I think that is tied to that sense of like wearing things that are away from the body in a slightly awkward shape, like cocoon coats and that kind of thing. These are items that have had a massive filter down, and I wonder if that comes from that same notion. I think women are less worried about looking pretty.
Yeah. But then you could trace that back to Chanel. You know,
that's true.
Couldn't you? The idea of wearing boys' clothes.
They're more okay with just being comfortable or getting on with their lives rather than objectifying themselves and doing a cinch waist.
I just want a
fitting
response to how women are seen, or women are seeing themselves within society. You know, ugly chic posits an alternative way of perceiving yourself as a woman, doesn't it?
And you don't probably go to your wardrobe and be like, I want to look ugly today,
yeah,
but I've got this meeting and this and this and this, and I just want, oh my god, it's raining, and just like get on with it, and rather than it's just getting on with life.
I think the comfort thing is a big thing, but I do think there's two aspects. There's one which is the pure comfort, that I'm going to wear flat shoes, not, as you say, not because I want to look kind of conceptual and ugly today, just because you need to run around. But then I do think the rise of kind of slightly kind of like remarkable or strange pieces that actually women are really buying into, and I think you saw it a lot with kind of, you see it in jewellery with like really surrealist things that have massively have filtered down, like all those kind of Delfina earrings that have had a huge effect, and I think that's what I'm interested in people buying into as well. It's kind of, on one hand you do have the comfort side, but then you do have people choosing these kind of like really odd prints, or even just like, you know, when you saw so many people wearing single earrings, and I thought that's quite, we did a thing on SHOWstudio called Ugly, and we looked at the single earring as part of that, and we thought that's quite an odd thing to have filtered down onto that kind of a mass level where it's really acceptable.
Well, it's an asymmetry that's fairly easy to achieve, isn't it? So just stick one earring on, you've got the look.
But it's almost like a safe punk, isn't it?
Do you think that that's a shy person who actually wants somebody to say, oh, you've only got one earring on? Oh, that's very interesting. I think there's lots of other levels about clothing.
I think if you wear a piece that's overtly different, then you're kind of saying, I'm not buying into
I'm not
tradition.
Or I'm ahead.
Yeah.
Or I'm so shy, just talk to me about the earring.
Yeah. All of which is all about Schiaparelli, isn't it, really?
Yes.
I mean, she was about comfort clothing, and
but she was also about
women.
Fun. She was about fun. I think fun is a really important element, that, you know, that she had a lot of fun with the way that she played with ideas.
But do you think that's why the revival isn't quite working so far, from my perspective? I feel like
because it's too serious.
And it's just so hard to be fun in fashion now, because the pace is so crazy. It's such about big money. It's so like mass. Everyone sees everything. It's so reported, and it's kind of almost, it feels bad taste almost to do something funny. It's really like
Anya Hindmarsh and your friend in LVMH, they're doing funny bags, aren't they?
I think
there's something you can swing around with messages on it or drawings.
But then I would say that's kind of gimmicky, less than. I think her wit was so intelligent and political.
This is very elitist. Yeah. There's a very small group, and she clearly wasn't bothered about selling anything. She was just part of an art group.
Which goes back to that sort of...
She was a kind of single one trying to survive. Wasn't that how she got into
She
fashion?
was, but she still had an income from her mother. She wasn't
Not
exactly on a
quite
council estate. She had a cook and maid, and, you know, so she wasn't slumming it too much, I don't think. But
who were the clients? Was it Gertrude Stein? Who were the famous clients who wore the Duchess of
Windsor? Mae West. She dressed Mae West as well. She did. Which goes back to the wit thing. I think.
Yeah, because after Mae West and the war and so on, Marilyn Monroe and Sophie Loren didn't wear stylish, did they? They were sexy waists,
that's true.
busts, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So
but I think it's significant that it was between the wars, though, because obviously, you know, people wanted to have fun, and then it didn't work after the Second World War, because then it was all...
But only the educated could have fun.
Yes, exactly.
Artfully educated for this particular collection of hers.
That notion of fun is interesting as well, because you can kind of relate it, very different house, but you can relate it to what's going on at Moschino, because I think that's an interesting one where that kind of real political humour but also like kind of strident political sloganing and communication, again, it just doesn't work anymore. I think, you know, maybe there's not the audience for it, or maybe because what Jeremy Scott is doing there is so different. I mean, it's funny, but it's not intelligently funny. It's,
hers is very deeply intelligent. I mean, it's all, I'm pointing at this, but I mean the original Elsa. It was deeply intelligent, you know. A lot of it was kind of very symbolic of sort of like the rise of fascism, you know, the Spanish Civil War, even because it's relevant now, Wimbledon, you know, she did the first sort of split
what
skirt,
about Greece?
didn't
How
she?
will Greece work out in the ready-to-wear collection?
Well, that's the thing, you want to see that. No one's doing that.
Reflected.
Will everybody cover their clothes with Euro logos?
But I think having Todd as the backer, I think, you know, it's a very commercial organisation. Obviously, all fashion is now.
It's hard to do anything.
It's hard to do something with the lightness of touch, you know, because there's so much riding on it.
She was creating for women in a particular time, wasn't she? So she was creating shorts because women were more active. And she was creating jumpsuits, wasn't she? You know, for a wartime era. So then
no one had seen culottes before. It was 1931, and it was kind of shocking at Wimbledon.
Yeah, but so then I suppose a contemporary designer now would look at the issues facing women now, what women need now.
Exactly.
You know, and do that in a very intellectual way that translates into.
But then the problem is the women who are spending the most on fashion, do they want the most progressive clothes? I think that's where fashion is so muddled.
When you think about it, like Catherine Hamlet did all those boiler suits. And she did that thing which was you didn't have to iron it, that was the point. And that was the feature of it.
Yes,
and
which was very political.
It was good, and she made those statements.
I think there are still political designers like Walter van Beirendonck, I think is both very funny and very political, but again it's on the menswear, so it's just harder to see it in the big...
And there are designers who are working in, you know, on that line between art and fashion. You know, before, I suppose, in her time, it was art and fashion were quite separate entities, whereas now there's much less of a separation. You know, you've got people like Margiela or Hussein who are actually putting their work in galleries rather than having artists to come and paint on their dresses. They're putting their own work and using...
Which is why this is so strange that it's kind of gone in such a kind of conservative route, in a sense, where it's not... You know, even like the mode of presentation is so traditionally fashion. It's not kind of... There's nothing particularly...
I think there is a way of fulfilling your brief, but I think you need a really intelligent creative to do it. And, you know, and I know what you mean about the couture client being more conservative in their tastes, but they can see an outrageous outfit. I mean, I don't know anything about couture, but I imagine you go, oh, I love that, but I want this and this, and I want it to be made more practical for my everyday living. But you know, the couture catwalk was a presentation of fantastic ideas.
Not every day,
not every day, but
But again, I think what you said about the brief is really important.
So I thought there was one discussion where couture clients do like to wear
the day wear
as well as well. There's more an introduction of more. Not every day. Though if I had couture, I probably would wear it every day.
I would wear it if I could afford it.
You need 7
bits.
7 what they call outfits.
Yes.
Matching.
I remember having a discussion, I think it was with like Alex Hugh or something, where we were like, look at the prices, and it sounds ridiculous because it is really expensive, but it's not that expensive compared to crazy ready to wear. That's what's weird, is how mentalities have changed so much, because you can go on Net-a-Porter and find a dress for like £20,000, and what I don't understand is why does that woman who will buy that dress for £20,000 on the internet, why would she not, maybe it is the same woman, but why would she not then go and get a piece made?
I think she's a different sort of woman. She doesn't, maybe she's
in Azerbaijan, that's the first thing.
She
can't get to Paris.
Yeah, that's true.
It's the nouveau riche, the parvenus, who don't know how to get into, how can I get to a couture show? How can I get them to make me dresses? So I'll just buy it off the rack. And it's a bit like Mrs. Harris, isn't it? In the Paul Gallico book, she's kind of wheedled her way in there. She's got in there. She's like, I want it. I'm going to spend my money on it. And saving up to get it, to get that special piece.
That's a really interesting point, actually. Do we think that fashion is especially Couture Week, is inclusive enough? Do you think that that there are women in the world who could afford these dresses, and is it speaking to them? That's one thing that I wonder.
I think inclusive is not a word I'd use for couture.
Couture, no. The whole point is it's exclusive.
But you want it to be exclusive, but you do think, are they missing a trick by not speaking to certain markets or certain...
Because there was that thing about how nobody in China, none of the super rich billionaires would buy couture. They would just buy it all ready to wear. But they were the richest people. This was a couple of years ago, but they were the richest people, but weren't spending their money on it.
But in the Dior film, he was complaining the whole time because they'd gone off to Los Angeles or New York or somewhere with the collection, with the machinists, with the company. And he couldn't get on with his collection. Do you remember in the movie?
Yeah, the Dior
and that's how the couture does work. You don't have to buy it online. They will go to
They go to you.
And they do go.
And
it is, quite a big outing for the team.
It's interesting also because I was speaking to Deborah Milner, who is a freelance, she works a lot with McQueen, but she's a couturier who kind of works. And she was saying that actually one of the things that she finds is people often don't want to even dedicate the time to the fitting. So it's like they don't actually see the appeal of couture because they're like, well, why do I have to spend I don't want to dedicate 3 times to getting it fit. And I do think the notion of our clothes fitting us is so different
when
now.
I spent a year in couture in the workrooms, every dummy was padded up with somebody's name on it, so you didn't actually really have to do a fitting unless you put on lost or something. So we used to make everything for the dummy.
A bit like bespoke shoes are done the same way, don't they?
Yeah,
you have your last.
So, but people are just so used to wearing clothes that don't fit them, I think. I think about this all the time. If you get so used to it, you don't even know what it means to wear something that fits properly, because everyone buys stuff off the rack and nothing quite fits properly, and no one even takes it and gets it fitted. So I just think...
Oh, well, excuse me. Everything is fitted in our place. Everything is bought off the rack and then fitted.
And then fitted.
I'd like to stand up for that.
That's good.
But that's back to ugly chic, isn't it? Cocooning, just a great big billowing thing, just put it on, don't have to worry about what's underneath.
And then you have to be 5'10".
That's the very
that's true.
If it doesn't have to fit perfectly, then why have it?
Yeah, I think the closest I ever came to buying couture is when a couturier said to me, imagine you get this jacket and you know every time you put it on, if you stay at exactly the same weight that you are now, every time you put it on, you will look amazing.
Yeah.
And I thought, ooh. And then I thought, cost per wear. I just have to wear it every day for the rest of my life.
It does ruin it for you, because I've said it on a panel, but I had a jacket and a suit made for me, and literally I can't wear tailoring off the rack ever. I've tried on so many jackets, and you're like, it doesn't feel right. It doesn't look good. And the jacket is like perfect. It just like fits you perfectly, looks amazing. Everyone's always like, that's a nice jacket, like just because it fits you so well. And it's just a black jacket.
But then what about the style? Because I mean, obviously men have been wearing bespoke suits forever, you know, but you can still see that one was made in the 70s, that one was made in the 80s, that one was made in the 90s.
But technically you can get it adjusted, can't you? If the collar's giving away a decade,
you can just get the collar nipped in. Yeah, I think that is part of the problem with it. But then
interesting if you're still wearing it in 20 years.
But I think vintage is so normal now, actually, that things look a bit retro, it's much easier to get away with them. Yeah, it's interesting.
I think more for a girl though, but I can imagine those guys that are wearing their slightly flecked, you can see the fabrics, that was an 80s fabric, that was however much you might kind of change the lapels or something.
To be honest, mine will be like covered in cigarette bands, ruined by no me anyway.
I bet you can tell a story.
Good, that's how it should be.
Should we look at what's happened at Schiaparelli for this season?
Gosh, no pressure on him.
This is his very first show, and just to tell a bit about the set, so it was quite sort of fantastic. When you walked in, there were kind of vintage lottery machines, and then all the cushions were kind of shocking pink, so a bit of an expected one there. And as I said at the start, he was at Givenchy and Christian Lacroix, but his most recent post was at Valentino, which I think you look at those 3 opening looks, and that Valentino sensibility definitely does come through. I think the reaction that most people at the show has been that it was much sort of prettier and much politer than what we were seeing.
I'm not shocked yet.
No, I'm not shocked.
Well, it's a voluminous coat, however, it's not.
It's very beautiful, looks very intricate, very chic.
Very well.
Yeah, nice
but
a little bit of
everyone's like, so those are kind of crazy pink lips.
The lips.
So,
okay, well, tick surrealism.
Yeah.
Another handprint.
I do think it's interesting though, just sorry to, it's really annoying for Brit, but just the first 3 looks, I think it's interesting to start with all that black because it is almost like a palette cleanser. Like those 3 looks, it's very much like, okay, fresh start, they're quite neutral shapes in a sense.
They could be Le Croix though, couldn't they?
Yeah, they could be Le Croix. But then that's interesting because then you think
Valentino.
Le Croix's wrapped into the history of Schiaparelli now as well, and I think that's...
Though 3, it's got a very casual, almost blouson jacket, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Sheer...
Which is very wearable.
Yeah, very wearable.
That's the jacket that you want.
Formal.
Yeah, that's true. I think, but then it goes back to what we're saying about new clients, is actually, if there are young girls who can afford couture, they're probably going to want something more like the jacket in 3 than they will...
Really? Or wouldn't they want something more traditionally glamorous?
Or fun.
I
sound like can't stop saying that word. But I just feel like that's at the moment that's what's missing a bit. But I guess the next one is a bit more.
I mean, it is very sensual, but it's very sheer. But then it's that kind of Valentino sensuality where it's quite prim, but.
Those first 5 looks, I could almost imagine them being anywhere.
Yeah.
If they kind of walk down any catwalk, you'd just be like, oh yeah,
there it is.
That's nice.
Quite don't know what to say about them. And then 6 comes out of nowhere.
I feel like there should be jewellery, you know? There should be jewellery with Schiaparelli, don't you think?
But I wonder if the decorations are much more embellished. We'll have a look at the close-ups afterwards.
When you get close up,
So 6 comes out of nowhere and then 7 goes back to what was set up at the beginning.
The styling of 6 is strange though, because if you imagine if they had put that with black trousers, it almost would have blended a bit more, but the combination of the yellow trousers and that jacket.
But shocking colourways are another Schiaparelli.
Yeah. Yeah, 7 I just think it could be on any runway, couldn't it? That could be on Valentino, it could be anywhere,
It's pretty but a bit dull.
I do wonder if the model wasn't ready and so they put that evening dress on because it does seem to be slightly out of sequence, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Of course, Issey Miyake dresses all that art group, I suddenly remembered.
Yeah, I'm a big Miyake fan.
A lot.
But I don't even know if an art woman would wear
8.
Yeah.
She'd certainly wear the one on the right.
She's bought her coat from Prada with the face prints 3 summers ago.
Yeah, exactly. That kind of,
which was fresh and new when that collection came out.
You're right, that kind of bright, fuzzy, fluffy. It doesn't feel that pioneering now.
No.
And then 9 is like a sort of a in between wars, almost land girly, tweedy little. I want to root for Schiaparelli.
Yeah, you want it to be really good, but it's just everything. I mean,
10 could be and Wilhelmista.
Yeah.
A little bit.
No, I know it's less obviously kind of like haphazard and whimsical as the last collections, but it does still feel just as confused.
You can see why this designer moved on, can't you?
I do think that you're right, that it's about the brief. I think that maybe they're not sure what they're asking the designers to do, you know.
And the weird thing
to get in there and make them give him, just say, come on, just say.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
and it's too easy to just blame the designer, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's far too easy.
The thing is, it's much harder to dislike than Marco Zanini stuff, because at least Marco Zanini stuff, like the first collection, I really didn't like. I thought it was kind of just so strange and not kind of like interestingly ugly, but at least you could form a really strong opinion on it. Because it feels like what they've done here is get someone whose clothes are much kind of easier on the eye and much prettier, but it's just
but
kind
it's
of
still lacking an identity.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I think it looks very difficult indeed. That skirt with that fur thing.
The use of tweed is
and then reminding us it's pink with beads.
I mean, it's such a hard balance. I was thinking then about Galliano going to Margiela, which I know it's related, but it's a bit different in that the designer is still alive, you know, and it's much more recent that Margiela was doing it.
Yeah.
And regardless of whether or not, you know, I like or don't like it, I think that he did find a balance between his own style and the style of the house.
But then I think Galliano has a much firmer identity than either Marco Zanini or Bertrand Guillon
So
have.
maybe that's the problem, you know, that they're not finding designers that have their own identity enough.
Well, because everyone was saying that Meadham Kirchhoff should have done it, which I think would have been like
that would have been genius.
Fantastic.
We'd been sitting here going, oh my god, what? Oh, look at that, look at that.
Yeah. And they're obsessed with Schiaparelli. They reference her so much in their work, but also I feel like all those kind of interesting collaborations, all those off the wall ideas. But that's what I think, it does go back to the brief, because the fact that they're not choosing those kind of characters.
Yes, even designers who've ever had their own houses.
Exactly.
Or they're choosing designers who've worked for others.
Worked for others, yeah.
And that's what this feels like.
Which implies that they want to mould someone a bit more than bring in an identity from outside.
Yeah, definitely.
Which isn't working so well at the moment.
They either need to be totally brave and get a major name and be like, okay, you do what you want to do for it. Commit.
Yeah. I mean, I think acknowledging that they themselves are not designers and maybe giving free rein to someone who really knows. I mean, I'm not saying that Bertrand Guyon and Marcus Zanini are not supremely talented, but
then there's the stylist, don't forget. The stylist is often the problem. It looks like it here.
But I think even if this collection was
what's going on
much, I do think I actually don't have that much fault with the clothes. I think it is an interesting collection. I think it's very beautiful, but I think the problem seems to be bigger than the collection. It is just like none of us quite know what. I don't even know what I want from this, because I don't know what they're trying to do. I don't know.
I want there to be some feeling of what the Schiaparelli brand was about, and at the moment that's not really there. There's something really beautiful, but it could be designed by somebody else.
Yeah, and the moment you mentioned Medium Kirchhoff, I just thought, what an awesome opportunity.
Yeah, that would have been a great.
But also, actually, even Galliano could have brought something amazing.
I think, in a way, Galliano would have been more in keeping here than at Margiela, actually. But
I'm going on the Margiela panel on Wednesday.
It just doesn't feel very modern. Also, I said this in my Gucci review about the Gucci show. Everyone was talking about how modern and exciting it felt, and then the casting was so like backwards, and you're seeing the same thing here. It's like very, very slender, just white women, and you're just a bit like, it goes back to that thing of like, if she was designing today,
what would she be doing?
What would she be doing? What women would she be championing? What women would she be interested in? And I don't think that the woman who would wear these looks would be the woman that she'd be inspired by.
No.
She'd be bored by her. If she ended up at a dinner party with her, she'd be like, oh my God, you bourgeois.
Exactly.
And
The other thing I will say about this, it seems to have stepped away from visual motifs referencing Schiaparelli much more so than Zanini or the in-house team did for the last season.
Yeah. Well, so I think that was apparently one of the problems with Zanini's work, that they thought it was too kind of referential, but they're not.
But he couldn't win in a way,
could exactly.
He? Because if he went one way, then they, obviously criticised it, so he went the other way. And
but they had a say in the creative. This is, it's not like the people who are heading this company sat there and saw the clothes for the first time on the catwalk. They would have been talking to Zanini the whole way through the creation process. So it seems like probably what they did was like, you can do that, maybe on that, and then it's seen.
Designed by
committee. It's not reacted
to
as they want it to be reacted to. So they make them change direction again.
Yeah.
Which is a bit like big budget films, isn't it? Sometimes.
Yeah, well they do.
Actually, what you want here is some kind of sense of independence. An independent spirit.
Yeah. Like when they change the endings in big budget films according to the studio,
to make it happy or something when it shouldn't be.
I mean, 22 is like but it's kind of what you expect, isn't it? It's like a vaguely kind of like the pink's there. It's
the hearts of it.
Exactly. It's
I want to be shocked and delighted. And
then it goes back to Grace Kelly at 24. And maybe
Yeah.
that's the client. Not.
Is this a more commercial client?
We're back to princesses.
It feels very safe.
But then that goes back to what is the aim? Because if the aim is to get couture clients, I completely agree. They'll probably be much more successful with this.
Yeah.
But then I just don't think long term that can be their aim. Like the long-term aim must be to make this a mega brand that has more awareness and that can do perfume and makeup and high street collabs. And
so they need a strategy.
They need a strategy.
They need to sort of
because you can look at a piece of it.
This isn't going to be shot everywhere.
No.
But the fragrance bottles that have become very valuable. What brands are they now? Apart from the stripy T-shirt. Gautier. There are several, aren't there? Which this brand would go straight into some divine thing with a.
Wait, did you see the new Miu Miu have just done their first fragrance, and the bottle is so kind of like such an object, and it's so kind of sculptural and interesting, and you're totally right. Like the Schiaparelli kind of perfume would just slot right into that mold.
Yeah, I wouldn't bother with the clothes. Just go straight in for the pieces.
Yeah, they should have just given it to Medium Kirchhoff.
Exactly.
It makes me angry when I think about it because it would have just been so perfect.
We'll send a message to Mr. Todd that we'll do it for him.
26 will do very well on the red carpet.
Yeah, I just love 27 though. That's
yeah.
Do you? I'll give you 27. Yes, I will definitely give you 27.
It's very
moment my brain actually thought that she's going to
But then maybe that is part of the ethos, is to get it more in the kind of red carpet market and get that kind of an awareness. Because you do think that...
God, the girl who wore that on the red carpet was so brave.
But there was another dress that was very deep V, and it was very chiffon. It had kind of like one of the bomber kind of bikery jackets, but in a silvery shot fabric way back. And I was looking at it and thinking, oh yes, you get a nice young starlet in that 14.
I like this feathery thing on the right, 15. I think it's rather wonderful.
That's
for a premiere.
That's
a really good piece, but I can't see whether it's feathers.
I think it's fur. And nobody would wear that at a premiere, would they? Because they'd get shot down.
Yeah.
Oh.
But then you do think if they'd gone more of that kind of angle, like if the aesthetic was more 15 than kind of 13.
13s.
But then it suddenly goes back to Glen Eagles at 13.
Yeah,
13 is,
13 is a worry.
Miss Jean Brody.
And the shoes are weird because the shoes look like just like those Chanel ones that they did 2 seasons ago, which I'm obsessed with. So that's probably why I'm seeing them. Yeah, I think we're all on the same page. That it's more of a kind of conservative. I think they'll get pretty young actresses in it, and then I think some of the kind of more conservative shapes like 18, 19 will do very well with the couture clients. But I just don't understand the long-term strategy. I also like the releases they put out when Lacroix did that first collection for them were all about kind of how they were going to do these continuous kind of one-off collections with different people, and then they were going to do all these amazing collaborations, and I just think, where is all of that? Like,
it has been rumbling on for quite a long time, because I remember like maybe 4 or 3 years ago going to her apartment and them saying, next season it's going to come out and we're going to have an amazing designer, it's almost finalised and you're not going to believe who it is, and then it was like, oh, is it happening now? Oh no. Is this happening now? No.
Yeah, it is one of those things where you're right, it's just rumbling is the right word, it's just kind of going on, and they keep kind of saying, oh, we're going to do this, and then it doesn't quite happen. Yeah. And I think they just need to commit, like they need to do a really interesting, amazing art collaboration, or they need to do something. Like, they have so much material, like why aren't they doing something amazing to do with like fashion windows or something, like really, you know, there's so many things out of that archive that they could toy with.
Or like, was it Prada or Miu Miu who did the thing with Miranda July? You know, the film. Yeah. I mean, that was just so clever. And she also would be a great Schiaparelli person. I know they've already got her, but you know, she's sort of bridges film, fashion, and literature and art. You know, she's a kind of perfect Schiaparelli
But
girl.
they just need to find the right modern woman for today.
Yes,
don't they?
they do.
Yeah, maybe that is the thing, is it's just too nostalgic.
And would you put Tilda Swinton in 28 on the cap?
You put her in 27.
You put her in 27, Kate
No, I've given 27 away.
Yes.
That's gone. That's sold.
I'll fight you for it back. I want it back.
Yeah. So it's perfectly okay, 28.
But that is just so... 29 is beautiful, but it's so Valentino.
Neither of those terrifying.
There's no identity here, really.
No, I don't see the... Yeah.
Just be brave, do one crazy collection with one person, and then, okay, did it work, yes or no, and then move on and do something else, rather than polite, conservative, beautiful. Oh, I feel quite angry, I really want it to work, but it's not.
Really good. And it's so, you're right, it's just so like, it's really frustrating to look at, because you're like, he's a great designer, he's a really talented designer, this is beautiful, but then you're like, it's just kind of pointless. You're like, what is he trying to achieve? What are they trying to achieve with him?
Have his own house and do this for your own house, but don't do it here.
No,
I just am aware that I'm waiting for the thing, and it's not there.
It's not going to come, we're just disappointed.
That's strange. 32.
That is for going to Iceland when you don't want to go.
Well, not to Bjork's house.
It is just...
I quite like that, it's quite brave. I know it's not very flattering.
But it just needs a big something.
Lots of things in your pockets.
It's all very delicate and careful.
But also, I think I would like it if I knew what they were trying to do. If they'd put out a press release that were like, we're reviving Schiaparelli purely to focus on evening wear in a couture basis, I would look at this and be like, what a lovely collection, that makes so much sense, beautiful. But it's like, you can't analyse it appropriately because you have no idea what they're trying to make happen. And it's like, if you knew that was the focus, that's why if this was on a Valentino runway, you'd look at it and you'd go, that's really beautiful, that's gorgeous, I love that dress, because you'd know what they were trying to do. Whereas here, it's almost like it does the clothes a disservice because there's no context for them, and there's no like...
they've left him contextless and hanging and probably badly briefed again.
Isn't that weird that every Schiaparelli show there doesn't seem to be an overarching theme?
Which does say that it's not the designer, doesn't it? It says that it's behind there.
Because Schiaparelli herself would do the overarching.
Yeah. Bit of pink. Yeah. But where's the art? There's no art, really, except the art of beautiful pattern cutting.
I mean, the dresses are beautiful, like 34 and 35 is so beautiful, but then the pink one is the last look.
Yeah.
Okay.
There he is.
Oh.
See, I feel like he's...
I'm sorry, I just waved at him. I feel sorry.
Can we see some of the clothes?
We know he's having...
It's difficult, isn't it? You just want to... Because I do think those dresses are lovely, and I think he's done a really beautiful couture collection, but it just seems like none of us quite think that's enough.
No.
The heart motif is that you are seeing those kind of...
And the large brooch. Is that, I don't know, yes.
But I just wouldn't know what house that was from.
No.
You know, I wouldn't assume it was Schiaparelli. That's the problem.
Yeah.
But going back to how we started this conversation, maybe 3 seasons in, 4 seasons in, we'll go, okay.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be funny if the same thing happened? You know, there was this sort of more conservative collection, and then the next one it was suddenly really, really over the top, and then he's out. And then the next one's brought in, and it's just
they've got to commit to him. Actually, otherwise it just looks
they have
a complete total mess.
I do think there's the problem is I look at it and I go, okay, so even just from getting a client perspective, what would entice a woman to come here rather than Valentino? If she wants like a beautiful, lovely long dress, why wouldn't she go? And that's the thing, is they've got to offer something new and something
becoming
clear.
Homogenous, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's like a homogenous couture sea of gorgeous, pretty dresses that, you know.
And this is so on tempo with what's happening at you know, Nina Ricci and Valentino and all those kind of houses that are doing that kind of feminine, beautiful, slightly virginal purity thing.
I just feel a bit deflated now.
Yeah, I feel a bit deflated.
Which is, I'm sure, not what he wanted.
No, it's so
beautiful.
beautiful.
So let's fix it for them. What do they need to do?
Strategy. They need a strategy. They need a really clear business strategy of what are they, you know, what are they trying to achieve? Who's their customer? How are they going to, you know, attack different markets? How are they going to reference Schiaparelli, the original Schiaparelli, and then, you know, how, from a design point of view, how are they going to take that spirit forward? You know, there's various different ways you can do it.
I think brief your designer properly and let him call the shots. Or her.
Maybe they need a woman.
Well, I don't think they need to change designer again.
No, I don't think they do at all. Because it's obviously a really talented designer. That's the thing, is they are beautiful clothes. It's just, you just need a point to them.
We need a point of difference.
Yeah.
Or just explain that point, and then we're like, okay, that's fine. You do it.
Yeah.
But just so we know, it's just not letting. I feel that we're all sort of partly in the dark.
Yeah.
Bertrand's probably partly in the dark.
In the dark too.
So it's a slightly subdued start to couture. But it is a beautiful collection. Yeah. That's the biggest irony. It is beautiful.
I quite like the gold one. I'd like that gold.
And they'll look nice on the red carpet. I just want to understand. And I just think you need people to know about the name, and this, I just feel like this is talking to the same set of people.
And it's very serious. Yeah. You know, I don't know.
It is, like you said, it's difficult to do humour on the...
Yeah, it is difficult. Well, let's hope they don't. Let's hope he gets a shot. Let's hope they keep on to him for a while and just give him some good direction. Should we give him a subdued but kind of hopeful round of applause?
Yeah, we're all rooting for him.
We are.
Come on, Bertrand.
Thank you.